Denis Villeneuve is the visionary director responsible for a few small films. I don't know if you've seen them. Villeneuve is one of the greatest living directors and he's my personal favorite. The French-Canadian filmmaker has directed 11 feature films, and in this video we're going to talk about each one, ranking them from worst to best. But before we do that, who is Denis Villeneuve?
Hi, my name is Denis Villeneuve.
Born in 1967 in Gentilly, Quebec, Villeneuve was obsessed with film from a young age.
Le contact avec le cerveau semble alors perdu. Suspense.
As a kid, he was captivated by science fiction, looking up to filmmakers like Steven Spielberg, Ridley Scott, and Stanley Kubrick. In school, he wrote screenplays and drew storyboards, earning him the nickname Spielberg. After a brief stint studying biology, he transferred to the University of Quebec to study film and never looked back. In 1991, he spent 7 months traveling the world, making over 20 short documentaries to be aired on national TV for Radio Canada.
Oui, moi j'ai l'intention d'aller au désert du Rajasthan, dans les profondeurs, c'est ça, du désert de Thar au Rajasthan, et de descendre la rivière Mekong aussi. Je compte bien aussi traverser avec le tondeur de gazon à côté, l'Himalaya de la Katmandou.
Villeneuve said this was one of the greatest experiences he had as a film student, learning about his camera, lighting, and storytelling. This spotlight opened the door for him to direct his first professional short film, Rewind Fast Forward, for Canada's National Film Board in 1994.
Go Africa after we done, but we have to set the place first. Like, yeah, so we know, changing a few we, yeah.
After a few years working as an assistant to other filmmakers at the NFB, Villeneuve felt a strong urge to break free from the slow-moving institution that was stifling his creativity.
When I was there, I felt that there was a rhythm, there was something about, there's a weight of the story, and I was looking for going towards fiction and to work with people of my own age.
This urge led him to music video directing, which he admittedly hated and quickly abandoned.
But what I loved was the ability to have an idea and to see the result 2 weeks later. At the National Film Board, you have an idea and you see the result 2 or 3 years later.
A pivotal moment in Villeneuve's early career was his introduction to a famous Quebecois producer, Roger Frappier. Frappier had an idea to make a feature film comprised of 6 unique short films by 6 different directors, of which Villeneuve was one. After the release of the film entitled Cosmos, Frappier expressed his willingness to work with Villeneuve should he ever direct his own feature film.
It was like offered on a silver plate, I must say. I was the luckiest, yeah.
At 29 years old, he jumped on the opportunity, and Frappier would end up producing Villeneuve's first 2 feature films. Villeneuve directed 4 movies in the Canadian film industry before taking a chance on an American screenplay that slid across his desk. The success of his 4th film, Incendies, put him on Hollywood's radar, and as a one-time experience, he flew to LA to make the 2013 film Prisoners. Little did he know, this flight would mark the end of an era.
It turned out to be a fantastic experience. I was really moved by how Americans are dealing with filmmaking. I just felt in love with their ways of dealing with cinema, and what I thought would be a one-time became my life.
Villeneuve fell in love with the way cinema was being created in America, and 11 years and 7 films later, we arrived to 2024 and the release of his latest film, Dune Part 2. So now that we know how he got to the place he is today, let's begin ranking every film directed by Denis Villeneuve. Number 11. Malestrom. Malestrom is Villeneuve's most experimental film. Right out of the gate, we're introduced to the narrator of the film, a lacerated fish on a butcher's block awaiting decapitation. Fish play a very symbolic role in this film. A young woman named Bibi has just gone through an abortion and is dealing with the guilt of killing her child. Adding to the emotional whirlwind, she hits a man while drunk driving, leaving him to die. The flawless exterior of her life is disintegrating beneath her feet, and it's too much to bear. While trying to dispose of her car, she drives it off the pier, deciding that if she survives, she'll give herself the right to live and start fresh.
La vie lui offre alors une deuxième chance.
Elle va traverser plusieurs événements très douloureux, très dramatiques, dont un avortement, un accident, tue quelqu'un. Donc beaucoup de culpabilité. Et elle sera après ça obligée finalement de s'ouvrir à la vie en ayant provoqué la mort. Donc il y avait un paradoxe là, que je trouvais très intéressant.
The film takes a shift when we're introduced to Evian, a down-to-earth scuba diver. The recent death of his father unwittingly connects him to Bibi in the most unlikely of scenarios.
Que le tueur de votre père meure d'une mort lente et atroce.
A romance forms between them, but the weight of Bibi's past keeps her emotionally distant. Malestrom addresses themes of guilt, death, and second chances. Throughout the film, the fish narrator repeatedly dies and picks up as a new fish on the block. This represents a pattern in the film of death bringing about new beginnings. These cycles of destruction and violence become embedded in many of Villeneuve's movies to come. The film has a dark humor to it that took me a while to pick up on, but once I got a sense of the tone it was aiming for, it became slightly more enjoyable. I think the cold blue color palette is very visually appealing and pairs well with the subject matter, and I really enjoyed Marie-Josée Croz's performance as Bibi. Despite tackling some thought-provoking themes, I didn't find the story very engaging, and I don't see myself ever coming back to rewatch this movie. While Malestrom shows audiences a glimpse of what Villeneuve is capable of, even the director himself admits that it was a personal failure.
The two first movies I made, specifically the second one, Malestrom, was quite arrogant and disconnected, and was at the time the most successful things I'd done. And for me, in the same time, a big failure because I felt that the movie didn't convey what I wanted to talk about. So it's like a disconnection between ideas and how I was using the cinema. So I stopped and I said the next time I would take the camera, it will be for something that is really meaningful.
While the creator of art is often their own harshest critic, it's not hard to understand his frustrations when watching this film. Number 10. August 32nd on Earth. August 32nd on Earth is Villeneuve's debut feature film, coming out 2 years prior to Malestrom. When a woman named Simone gets in a bad car accident, she decides to take the experience as a second chance at life, to live it the way she always wanted to. She quits her modeling job and sets her mind on one very specific thing.
Est-ce que tu voudrais me faire un enfant, Philippe, s'il te plaît?
When they were younger, Simone and her best friend Philippe agreed to have a baby together if they were still single by the time they turned 30. Simone wants to cash in on this promise early because life is too short to waste a moment.
C'est vraiment dur d'être ton meilleur ami, Simone Clément.
Je savais que tu dirais oui.
After much resistance, Philippe carelessly says that he'll do it, but only in a desert. With no time for deliberation, tickets are purchased and the pair set off to the Utah salt flats.
Do you know where the desert is? Deserts everywhere.
Villeneuve is repeatedly drawn to deserts in his movies. The deeper you go into the desert, the deeper you go into your own mind. It's a vast landscape of self-discovery. Deep down, Philippe knows that he shouldn't have a baby with Simone. He used to be madly in love with her, but time passed and he was forced to move on. He knows that she never saw him the same way, and now is no different.
Ben voilà, tu ne m'aimes pas comme je t'aime, donc te faire l'amour, et je suis foutu.
As a debut film, August 32nd on Earth is really not bad. It's vibrant and upbeat while simultaneously addressing themes like confronting your mortality and navigating imbalances of love. The plot is very simple, but it drags on a bit longer than needed. When compared to Malestrom, August 32nd on Earth isn't doing nearly as much and could be considered inferior from a technical standpoint. However, I think its simplicity and warmth give it a charm that lends to a more enjoyable viewing experience. It's no masterpiece, but there's a lot to like about it. Number 9. Polytechnique.
I'm deeply inspired by what I fear, and Polytechnique for me is a huge nightmare. For me to approach it and to get closer a little bit to it was really frightening, but a great experience at the same time.
After a 9-year hiatus from filmmaking, Villeneuve returned with his third film, Polytechnique. He wasn't proud of his first 2 films, calling them arrogant and disconnected, and wanted to return to the director's chair when he felt ready to tell a story he could be truly proud of. The Montreal Massacre was that story.
So it felt that is a project that was put upon my shoulder and I didn't say no. For me, it was a very, very meaningful movie.
Polytechnique is a dramatization of the tragic shooting in 1989, where a deranged misogynist set out to enact his morbid counter-argument to feminism.
Même si l'épithète tireur fou va m'être attribuée dans les médias, je me considère comme un érudit rationnel que seule la venue de la faucheuse ont amené à poser des gestes extrémistes.
The assassin sought to kill all the female engineers, believing them all to be proponents of the feminist movement. That day, 14 women were killed, and many more were injured. The film bounces between the perspectives of a man, Jean-François, and a woman, Valérie, who were both there the day of the shooting.
Peux-tu me prêter tes notes, s'il te plaît?
Merci. Le cours est dans 15 minutes.
Oui, je rejoins.
We see the fear, anguish, and chaos experienced by both on that day and for many days into the future. The film excels in highlighting the lingering persistence that such a catastrophic event can have in the mind of a survivor. It drives people to various ends. Some strive for change in future generations.
Si j'ai un fils, je veux lui apprendre l'amour. Si j'ai une fille, je veux lui apprendre que le monde lui appartient.
And others remove the ability to ever see the memories play again. As Villeneuve often does in his films, he presents all sides of the story and lets the audience make their own moral judgments. This film places the camera in the perspective of the students who lived it and explores how this manifestation of violence affects the individuals. The film is shot beautifully in black and white, which in large part was done to mask the color of blood. The performances are all very well done, especially given that each scene was filmed twice to create a French cut and an English cut.
It felt a big responsibility, but it's exactly the kind of movie I wanted to make. Meaning I will really make something for other people, something that will be an act of generosity.
Polytechnique is a powerful re-entry for Villeneuve into the film industry and a stinging reminder of the evil that exists in our world. Number 8. Enemy. Enemy is easily Villeneuve's most confusing film. It's most enjoyable to view it as a puzzle, piecing together the symbols and clues to craft your own interpretation.
I'm sorry, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm calling to speak to Daniel St. Clair.
Much of the film is left intentionally vague, which I personally love. How I see it, the film centers around one man who has a split personality.
In Enemy, the beauty of it is, I think, is that it's a story of two men and it's a story of one man. It's like 1 + 1 = 1.
Jake Gyllenhaal plays Adam, a college professor, and Anthony, an aspiring actor. These identities, both starting with the letter A, are the same person.
He looks exactly like you.
What do you mean exactly like me?
The non-linear timeline of the film folds on itself, cutting between Adam and Anthony, making it seem as though they're existing simultaneously.
You brought my wife into this, man! So I'm gonna bring your girlfriend into the picture as well.
The surface plot primarily follows Adam as he tries to make sense of there being a stranger out there who's 100% identical to him. Beneath what we are shown lies the truth of his situation. He is one man whose fear of commitment has driven him to a life of infidelity.
The ring, the mark on your finger.
What are you talking about? I've always had this.
His unhealthy relationships with the women in his life have fractured his psyche and turned himself into his greatest enemy.
This idea that terrorized me, who is in control inside yourself? Is it your conscious or your subconscious?
He's afraid of being trapped in the web of marriage and a family, to the point where the woman he claims to love becomes the embodiment of that fear.
Ellen?
The film concludes by alluding to the continuation of this destructive cycle.
This is a pattern that repeats itself.
While Enemy comes in at the lower end of this list, it's one of the most interesting films to dissect, and with every rewatch, I enjoy it more. It presents more explicit and general themes of chaos and control that can make it difficult to see the reality at hand. But with a bit of perseverance, it all comes together in one beautiful web. Gyllenhaal gives two uniquely different yet equally impressive performances.
I told you.
And I particularly want to highlight Sarah Gadon's captivating performance as Helen.
Did you have a good day at school?
The cinematography is very well done, and while some may ridicule the sickly yellow coloring, I think it effectively alienates the film from the real world, making it feel foreign and unsettling. Enemy is a great Villeneuve film, and we're only at number 8. Number 7. Dune.
Every time someone asks me what was my one of my biggest dreams in cinema, I always answer to adapt Dune.
On the heels of directing Blade Runner 2049, Villeneuve embarked on another, much larger science fiction universe with Frank Herbert's Dune. Having never read the books or seen David Lynch's adaptation,
try looking into that place where you dare not look. You'll find me there staring back at you.
This film was my introduction to these characters in the spice-filled deserts of Arrakis. Spice is the most valuable resource in the universe, so control of the planet lies at the center of political tension.
My desert. My Arrakis.
The film follows a young boy named Paul Atreides, who has inherited a particularly significant bloodline. When the Atreides are granted possession of Arrakis, it soon becomes clear that they have been moved like pawns by the Emperor for complete destruction. Paul's visions of the future collide with his personal beliefs as he reckons with the possibility that he could be the Lisan al-Gaib, the promised messiah to free his people from their suffering and lead them to a green paradise.
For thousands of years, we've been carefully crossing bloodlines to bring forth
what? The film concludes the first half of the story with Paul setting out to the desert with the Fremen people to learn their ways. forging his own path like his father told him.
I found my own way to it. Maybe you'll find yours.
On its own, Dune is a very good movie, but the addition of Part 2 elevates both films to another level. The film is a lot of world building and setup, so if you decide to tune out the intricate details, it will all end up going over your head and make the film drag unnecessarily. For the attentive viewer though, the power dynamics of this universe, with its clashing of prophetic and pragmatic motivations, spearheaded by compelling, well-written characters, make Dune one of the best sci-fi films of the decade. No other director could bring out such beauty and enchantment from such a bleak and unvaried color palette. From vast sandy deserts to double sun eclipses, to the shimmer of spice in the air, Villeneuve crafted a tangible universe that you can become fully immersed in.
The mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience.
Adding to the visual splendor is Hans Zimmer's soundtrack, which is sure to leave a lasting impact. The cast is one of the most star-studded I've seen, and each role only adds to the experience. Dune is the first half of a greater whole, leaving you anxious to see where Paul's journey will lead him next.
Someone was coming inside the studio saying, okay, that's enough, no more movies for you, you did it, and cinema is over. My first feeling would be gratitude. I painted myself in a corner. I did half of it. I did half of a big movie. I did Dune Part 1, and I need to do the second part now.
Also, I'd like to note that the top 7 films of this list are some of my all-time favorites, and I hold them all as nearly perfect cinema. On my Letterboxd, not a single one is rated below a 4.5 out of 5, so at a certain point the ranking just comes down to preference. With that said, number 6, Sicario. Sicario is one of the most gripping, suspenseful crime thrillers I've ever seen. It stars Emily Blunt as Kate Mercer, a skillful yet naive FBI agent who joins a shady government operation to take down a drug cartel.
In 6 months, every single house you raid will be rigged with explosives. Do you want to find the guys responsible, yes or no?
Led by an unnervingly casual CIA agent, Matt Graver, and a mysterious man named Alejandro, Kate volunteers to fight the evil at the US-Mexico border.
I'll volunteer.
As the operation unfolds, it becomes clear that the limits of the law have faded into moral ambiguity.
Nutty, yeah, that was fucking illegal. You want to start a war?
She will follow a group of people that are ready to cross the lines in order to achieve their goal.
Kate is kept in the dark for as long as possible, alongside the audience, and soon comes to find the real reason she was selected. As they seek to kill the drug lord Fausto Alarcón, the perspective shifts to Del Toro's character Alejandro.
You look like a little girl when you're scared.
While Kate's story is at the forefront of the film, Alejandro's revenge arc is the driving force.
Alejandro is the soul of the movie.
He was brought on Graver's team as the hitman due to their mutual vendettas against Alarcón. Alarcón ordered the execution of Alejandro's wife and daughter, and since their deaths, he has dedicated his life to exacting vengeance.
No fue personal. Para mí sí.
He is the Sicario the movie is named after. Through Del Toro's character and the US government's conduct in dealing with the cartel, the film presents the complicated dilemma of doing wrong for the sake of doing right. How much violence is justified for the sake of eliminating it?
If your enemy is doing reprehensible things, do you need to do the same thing in order to be stronger than him?
Once again, Villeneuve seeks to pinpoint the cyclical nature of violence, and rather than make any statements on US politics or the Mexican drug cartel, see how the violence affects individuals. How do we deal with the threats outside our own borders? From the first scene, we see the evil that exists beneath our noses and the potential for catastrophe at any given moment. With this precedent to anticipate disaster, Sicario creates a tension that never lets go. Even when nothing seems to be happening, like a boy playing soccer, the threat of the unexpected looms heavy around the corner. Sicario has some of the best action scenes in cinema, with beautiful cinematography, a gripping score, and a noteworthy debut script by Taylor Sheridan. Number 5, Arrival.
I would love to make a sci-fi movie, but most of the time sci-fi movies are quite disappointing.
If you go into Arrival expecting an action-packed alien sci-fi movie, you're probably going to be disappointed, but lucky for you, this is better. It's a first contact film that cares less about the aliens themselves and more about language and communication.
We wanted to create a sci-fi movie that, like when you're a kid in a school bus on a rainy day going to school and you dream looking at the clouds, and it's raining and that kind of atmosphere.
On a day that could be any other day, 12 pod-like alien ships arrive on Earth.
So far, there are 12 unidentified objects spread across the globe. There is no obvious logic to their location.
Dr. Louise Banks, played by Amy Adams, is a linguist recruited to interpret the alien language and establish communication with them. This proves to be a time-consuming, strenuous task, but with the assistance and comfort of physicist Ian Donnelly, they learn the language. As nations around the world use their own methods to communicate, tensions rise as the aliens' intentions remain unclear.
What is your purpose?
Do they bring a weapon or a tool? Do they come to save humanity or to destroy it? Interspersed throughout the film, Louise has various flashbacks of her daughter's life, leading up to her early death from an uncurable illness. This mother-daughter relationship lies at the emotional heart of the film. As things unfold, the alien language proves to be much more personally relevant to Dr. Banks, and its implications will alter the course of humanity forever.
I called you, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
Arrival is a sci-fi thriller that doubles as a deeply emotional, heartfelt story about the way we respond to fear and tragedy, even when aliens aren't to blame. The film obviously talks a lot about communication through the abstract way the aliens write. Their sentences have no beginning or end, a motif repeated throughout the film, even in the opening line.
I used to think this was the beginning of your story.
Eventually, the film takes on a new message, one about embracing the journey you're on and the people right in front of you. Arrival is completely gripping, from the score to the cinematography to the performances, and when I say performances, I am referring specifically to Amy Adams, who delivers the best performance of her career.
Amy Adams is not only one of the best actresses alive, if not the best, she's also the most lovely human beings. It was just like sunshine on set all the time with Amy.
The concept of aliens making contact with Earth has been done many times before, but Arrival spins it in a completely new direction, resulting in a near flawless representation of what modern sci-fi should aspire to be.
It's a delicate, poetic, powerful story. And I think that if an audience member embraced the journey, I think he will be deeply moved, and the movie will raise beautiful questions in his heart.
Number 4. Dune Part 2. Dune Part 2 is the only Villeneuve film I've been fortunate enough to see in theaters. And if any film deserved that honor, it's this one. Part 2 picks up immediately where the first film left off, gripping you from the very first scene and not loosening up for 2 hours and 46 minutes. Paul learns the ways of the Fremen and eventually becomes one of them, taking on a new name, Muad'Dib.
The one who points the way. That is a powerful name.
With everything he does, he aligns himself more and more with the prophecies of the Lisan al-Gaib, stirring up the hopes of the masses. Learning of the Emperor's scheme that killed his father, Paul has to unify the Fremen people to overthrow him. To do this, whether he believes it or not, Paul must accept his identity as the Lisan al-Gaib. Meanwhile, another messianic alternative enters the picture. Enter Fade Rautha. Fade is pitted against Paul to rule should the Emperor be overthrown, and their paths are destined to cross. As Paul grows as a leader and an acceptance of his identity, Chani remains defiant and resolute against the religious superstitions.
This prophecy is how they enslave us!
This relational conflict underscores the political tensions at the surface and leaves the audience with a stinging feeling of unresolve as the film concludes. Somehow in Part 2, the cinematography, score, the stakes, everything got better. If you haven't given Dune a chance yet, I highly recommend watching both films back to back, as it really is one story, and there are so many details of overlap that you miss out on if you separate them. Part 2 brings about the completion of Paul's character arc, while opening up the pathways for a third film to continue the story through the Holy War and Chani's internal struggle. It's evident that there's so much more story to tell, and I can't wait to see what direction Villeneuve will take in adapting Dune Messiah. Number 3. Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner 2049 was my introduction to Denis Villeneuve, and immediately I was hooked. Villeneuve was a big fan of the original film from 1982, directed by Ridley Scott, and felt that if anyone would do right by directing a sequel, it had to be him.
By far one of my favorite movies of all time, so I said, I don't want someone else to fuck this up. I mean, I need to. Even it's like a suicidal mission, you know, it's like super risky. Everybody will hate me. I can be banned from the cinematic community from the rest of my life, but it's worth the risk. Artistically, it's such a big challenge, but such a beautiful one.
The result is a masterclass of science fiction that could very well be the best sequel of all time, where the bleakness of reality is saturated by the unnatural vibrance of neon lights and radiation. A replicant embarks on a mission of self-discovery.
The real boy needs a real name. Joe.
Spurred by a fire burning somewhere within him where his heart should be, Joe follows his memories to see if this real boy, born of a woman, the chosen one, could really be him.
I always knew you were special.
Unfortunately, he's not alone in this quest, as the answer to his question could shift the balance of control away from the domineering Wallace Corporation.
I need the child. To teach them all to fly.
Blade Runner 2049 is a methodical, booming quest to seek out humanity in a world devoid of all things genuine. Through the eyes of a replicant, we experience the excitement of hope and optimism and the lengths someone will go for something they believe in.
Dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do.
If you want to hear me talk about Ryan Gosling, I've already made a whole video dedicated to him, so you can watch that after this one. But needless to say, I believe his performance is a large reason for the film's post-theatrical success.
I'm sorry it had to be me.
With Villeneuve in the director's chair, Roger Deakins on camera, and Hans Zimmer composing the score, this film had no choice but to be a masterpiece. The dystopian world is immense and breathtaking in the most unsettling way, and the beautiful synthesizer-rich score takes inspiration from the original by Vangelis while differentiating its own unique sound. Directing Blade Runner 2049 was a dream come true for Villeneuve, and the risks he took in making it paid off. Perhaps not in box office terms, but as far as cinematic importance and execution, 2049 was a success. While Arrival was his first movie in the sci-fi genre, 2049 was his first time entering in a futuristic world very distant from our own.
And one thing that I cannot do at home in Canada is science fiction, and I'm dreaming to do science fiction since I'm 10 years old. I spent all my teenage years to dream, a lot of dream, you know, I invested everything in dreams, so at least I can do something with those dreams now.
His dreams of making a science fiction film, the genre that drew him to film as a kid, finally came true.
The thing that brought peace to my heart once the movie was finished is not that I thought that the movie was perfect, is that I thought that what I was seeing on the screen was me.
Number 2. Prisoners. Prisoners marks Villeneuve's Hollywood debut, departing from his Canadian background for the first time.
As a kid, as a teenager, I was dreaming to make a movie in Hollywood. So when I saw an opportunity, a door opened to make a movie up there, it was too much of a big dream. I said, I will try it once.
It's arguably Villeneuve's darkest film, and for a long time I held it as my personal favorite. Enemy was released the same year, marking 2 Villeneuve films starring Jake Gyllenhaal back in 2013. The plot centers around the kidnapping of 2 young girls and the clashing efforts of Father Keller Dover and Detective Loki to find them. As the days tick on and the chances of the girls' survival dwindle, Dover becomes increasingly violent and erratic in the name of love. He targets Paul Dano's mentally handicapped character Alex Jones, inflicting inhumane torture in desperate pursuit of a lead.
They didn't cry until I left.
This begs the familiar question, how far can violence be justified for the sake of doing right? This moral dissent is further emphasized by the opening scene of the film, where the Lord's Prayer is recited.
Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.
It's safe to say that forgiveness is the last thing on Mr. Dover's mind. The trail of this mystery leads deeper into a dark maze of concealed evils, and both father and detective will stop at nothing until they see the girls return to safety. Every performance in this film is incredible. Hugh Jackman is forceful and menacing,
And why did you look for my fucking daughter rather than fucking...
while Gyllenhaal gives a more restrained yet doubly memorable performance.
Yeah, no. You bought children's clothes. Did I?
The gloomy, pessimistic clouds that loom in every shot smother all hope of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Roger Deakins isn't afforded his characteristic, breathtaking landscape shots, yet each scene and insert shot is crafted with expert precision. The film speaks to the evils of the world and the way it can creep into our normal lives.
My husband likes to be prepared for emergencies.
Even a man prepared for the end of the world was unable to keep it at bay.
Tell me!
It's worth noting that Prisoners was the beginning of Villeneuve's working relationship with cinematographer Roger Deakins. Their partnership continued on Sicario and Blade Runner 2049, and has led to the most visually breathtaking shots in cinema. And finally, coming in first place is Incendies. Incendies is one of the most ambitious and gut-wrenching stories Villeneuve has put to film. I avoided watching it for a long time because I knew it wasn't going to be an easy watch. Incendies is Villeneuve's 4th feature film, and to me it stands above the rest. It was his last film before making the jump to Hollywood 3 years later, and it marks an unforgettable end to that era. Incendies begins with twins Jean and Simone as they receive instructions from their mother's will.
Aucune pierre ne sera posée sur ma tombe et mon nom gravé nulle part. Pas d'épitaphe pour ceux qui ne tiennent pas leurs promesses.
They are given 2 envelopes, one for their father, who they had presumed dead, and the other for their brother, who they never even knew existed.
À Jeanne et Simon, L'enfance est un couteau planté dans la gorge. On ne le retire pas facilement.
Setting off to the Middle East alone, Jeanne slowly unravels the pieces of her mother's past, revealing a woman she never really knew. The present-day narrative is paralleled to their mother's tumultuous life as a young woman in the Middle East. Nawal's journey drives the film, and it's her horrific experiences that elicit the most visceral emotions. Through religious extremists, corrupt politicians, imprisonment, familial exile, among other sufferings, Nawal is a beacon of perseverance and strength. Incendies deals with forgiveness and an all-too-familiar theme of the repercussions of evil and violence. It shows how anger is passed down through generations and how that hate-filled inheritance can be stopped. The emphasis on forgiveness is powerful, and I feel that it's such an essential element that's lacking in Villeneuve's other films that deal with similar themes. In the suffering and the torment, the power to not just make it through, but to forgive the persecutor I find very moving. Because of that, even though this movie gets incredibly dark, it doesn't leave you stuck in that darkness. It shows you the way out.
But for me, Incendies is not a dark story. For me, Incendies is a story that brought me a lot of hope about humanity, that it's a story that this idea of Wajdi, that it's possible maybe to end those cycles of anger inside a family or violence inside a society. What I love about Wajdi Mawad is that he has no cynicism. He believes in humanity, and that it brought me a lot of hope.
This movie has perhaps the most appalling twists in any film I've ever seen. I anticipated a twist going into it, but even with that foreknowledge, I didn't see it coming. I've heard criticisms of the coincidental nature of certain plot points in this film, and I do acknowledge that. However, in no way do I feel that it detracts from the film's impact or discredits any of its profundity or importance.
حسادكم وهكون دايما موجود مشانك ومشان ولادك.
There's something about this film that impacted me on a level that no other Villeneuve film has. It's hard to put into words. It feels grander and more substantial than the films following or preceding it. I think a flaw in certain of Villeneuve's modern films is that they can get lost in their own larger-than-life atmosphere, that they lose a quality of realism. That grounded, gritty realism is where this film excels. Incendies takes the best qualities of Villeneuve's Hollywood era and combines them with the less refined, raw characteristics of his earlier filmography.
Il nous invite à prendre le thé.
Incendies is a film that people will remember. It marks a pivotal point in the director's career, and you can feel his passion for the story through the screen.
It was an act of trying to just follow a pure impulse with my relationship with the mise en scène and the camera, not trying to do like what I've seen before, not trying to be influenced by something else, just trying to be deeply honest with the camera. It's the first time I felt home doing Incendies. It's the first movie that I said, I don't know what the other people will think, if it's boring for them or whatever, but there was something I feel very close. It's by far one of the closest movie I've made to myself.
Villeneuve's success as a director can be attributed to his authentic love for telling stories.
I want to make good movies. The idea is to try to make a good film, at least one good film in your life.
Specifically, he tells stories that resonate with something inside of him, so the emotions conveyed on screen come from a place of sincerity.
When I choose projects in my life, it was always because there was something, a deep connection or something deeply inspiring for me about what the screenplay was talking about.
I always try to find in some way something that will remind me home in some ways from where I'm coming from. Even if I'm abroad, I am able to find some links that will allow myself to tell a story. But definitely cinema is a universal language, and it's a language that is designed to build bridges.
On top of this, he sees every day on set as an opportunity to learn and improve as a filmmaker.
Me, as a director, I'll be in a position where I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna be in a position where every shot, every day, I'm gonna learn something about filmmaking. I'm in a learning process where it's like a very rewarding and exciting.
This mindset turns each project into a building block, preparing him with the technical ability and confidence to bring his next film to life.
So it was like steps. I would have never done Blade Runner after Incendies, and I would have not been able to do Dune before Blade Runner.
I'm the product of my experiences. What will inspire me next, I don't know. It's the way it is. But I think that making cinema is a privilege. It's a chance, and when you have the chance to use a camera, you have to use it in order to talk about something that is very important for you.
A good film is a film that has you can see for the strength of the story, and then you can go into the character behaviors and to the politics of what it means, and then to a deeper level. And it's like when you succeed, it's the quest of a lifetime to do that for me. But yeah, that's cinema.
The thing I love about cinema is teamwork. The idea of sharing creativity with other artists like that, and it creates something new out of conversations and out of bouncing ideas in a room. Otherwise, I will do painting alone in my basement. You know, it's the thing that deeply moves me about cinema is to see 200 people in the mud under the rain trying to create poetry together. It's like my favorite thing about cinema. That's my favorite thing about cinema. Cut.
If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe and let me know your ranking in the comments. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.